Welcome to the movies that made me. I am your host, Luke Sorba. Before I introduce my guests, I'm going to say a little bit about double acts, partnerships, and couples. I couldn't quite decide what the best way of describing this particular aspect of filmmaking is the best, but call them what you want. I'm looking for movies that have that special chemistry between two co-stars which can ignite a movie. And I've noticed that in my list most are comedies, but not exclusively so. However, I will start with some of the earliest movies in this category that I remember watching on telly. Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, for instance, in movies like The Road to Morocco. More recently, it might be Harold and Kumar escaping from Guantanamo Bay. We have Mel Gibson and Danny Glover as Murtagh and Riggs in Lethal Weapon, or Tracy and Hepburn as Adam and Amanda in Adam's Rib. There was Tarzan and Jane in Tarzan the Ape Man, or you could go for Tarzan and Cheetah in the same movie, or two non-humans such as Donkey and Shrek in Shrek, or Baloo and Bagheera in The Jungle Book, Timon and Pumbaa in The Lion King, and then their own spin-off. British cinema gave us Sid James and Barbara Windsor in Carry On Doctor, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in Dracula. Hollywood delivered Karloff and Lugosi in The Black Cat, and Abbott Costello meeting Frankenstein, and the legendary Laurel and Hardy in Sons of the Desert. Buddy cops include Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce as Holmes and Watson in The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy in The Heat, Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan in Rush Hour. There has been Thelma and Louise with Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis, or Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell in His Girl Friday, Doris Day and Rock Hudson in Pillow Talk, William Powell and Myrna Loy as Nick and Nora in the Thin Man franchise, Bogey and Bacall in To Have and Have Not, Betty Davis and Joan Crawford in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. We have had heartthrobs, Newman and Redford in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, or Robot C-3PO and R2-D2 in Star Wars. Steve Martin and Lily Thomas were hilarious in All of Me, as to are Mira Sorvino and Lisa Kudrow in Robbie and Michelle's High School Reunion. Then there's Kevin Hart and Dwayne Johnson in Central Intelligence, Jeff Daniels and Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber, which I've never seen. And of course, Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau in The Odd Couple, which I have. Michael Redgrave was outstanding opposite his ventriloquist's dummy in Dead of Night, and Lindsay Lohan opposite herself in The Parent Trap, as was Hayley Mills in the original. We had Bill Bojangles Robinson and Shirley Temple show-stopping in The Little Colonel, and Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers doing the same in Top Hat. And there are great cross-generational pairings such as Big Daddy and Hit Girl with Nick Cage and Chloe Grace Moretz as father and daughter in Kick-Ass, as well as Heck and Ricky, played by Sam Neill and Julian Dennison in Hunt for the Wilder People. And that's without mentioning any of the films that will be considered in this episode and chosen by the double act, who are my guests today. So they get a chance to speak now. Playwright, actor and theatre director Leslie Ann Albiston and her husband, actor and TV presenter Neil Cole. Welcome to the podcast. I hope you are well and thinking about movies. So I'm going to move from my list of sort of films with co-stars who have special chemistry that I can remember into ones that you've chosen. I'd love to hear a little bit about the movie itself, the content, and then obviously why it has resonated with you. And do join in when it comes to discussing people's suggested movies. But I will start by giving the platform to Neil, because you have volunteered Way Out West with Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. And I put their first names in just to be able to
good.
Which Way Out West we're talking about. I had huge fun rewatching it, not having seen it in a while. But let's find out why you have fun watching this film.
I think it was tricky because, like you, I went through a list in my head of all the films that had been meaningful to me that had double acts and couples. And, things like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Casablanca, they were sort of on my list. But I just couldn't couldn't ignore Laurel and Hardy. So the one of the main reasons is I remember watching Laurel and Hardy as a kid. So it was like it was hard to actually choose which film, and also there are loads of shorts. So I had to almost randomly choose this one, but this was the one I remembered because it was sort of had a Western theme. It was kind of felt like a cowboy film, even though it wasn't cowboys as such. And because my career began in a double act, as well as the lifelong double act that I am in with Leslie, sort of a comedy double act, that dynamic I felt was important to flag up in this podcast. So it basically Stan and Ollie are on a mission, and they're very tatty. I think the idea is that they're quite poor, so they've been employed to go across the United States to a place called Brushwood Gulch to deliver deeds to a girl whose father has died, having, without her knowledge, become an extremely wealthy gold prospector, and he's left her the gold mine in his will, but she doesn't know anything about it, which is weird. I suppose she didn't have Twitter. And then, but the scheming bar owner where the girl works decides that he and his wife will pretend that his wife is the Mary Roberts and take the deeds for themselves. And then hilarious slapstick ensues. And there was so much to enjoy watching it again. Like you, I hadn't seen it for several years, but there are so many sort of jokes that are shared across the decades. So, of course, at the time, they sort of came out of the music hall tradition. So they were like a lot of the music hall acts, they were doing each other's material, which is very frowned on now. But you look at it, and you look at Oliver Hardy's looks to the camera. I mean, that's incredibly modern. It's very meta.
Neil, not just looks to the camera. What about the meta-textual line that Stan says? How did you get changed so fast? So he's kind of noticing that they've bent time for a joke to work. Oliver didn't have the time to get changed between having his clothes ripped off in a sort of chase scene and emerging in the next one.
Yeah,
I hadn't remembered it, and I was stunned.
It's very meta. There's loads of little breaking down the fourth wall, stepping outside the conventions of film, and they just take it in their stride. It's incredibly modern like that. But there's loads of gags that you see, like everything from Ollie, or Babe as he's known, falling in an unexpectedly deep part of the creek. That was copied by Dawn French and Vicar of Dibley. There's so many gags and some brilliantly surreal gags. There's lots of Vic and Bob in there, obviously another double act, but like the lighting the thumb, lighting a flame out of your thumb, the stretching of the neck, which is an extraordinary effect, the donkey being winched up, playing with the weight differential between Oliver Hardy and a donkey. There's so much in there that's, and of course, famously, or not necessarily famously, but the actor that plays it was hilarious to watch him. The actor that plays the bar owner, the scheming bar owner, who is James Finlayson, he's just mugging the whole time. He just does a very extraordinary,
he's not only mugging, Neil. I'm sure you know this. When the shotgun goes off and he's sitting in his bed, his reaction is to say,
"Don't."
And that's where Dan Castellaneta took Homer Simpson's signature noise. Did you enjoy it, Leslie?
I did enjoy it. It did take me back to my childhood, when we spent many a happy family afternoon watching the old black and white comedies, Laurel and Hardy, all of them really. And I mean, we only ever saw things in black and white in those days. We only had a black and white TV, but I did love Charlie Chaplin more than Laurel and Hardy. But it does seem slow and very mannered and drawn out by today's standards of comedies, which are normally really fast and sort of quick fire jokes and things. So you have to sort of sit and wait for the joke to come.
But when it comes, it really delivers.
Yeah.
I think Charlie Chaplin is like a one-man double act,
Yeah.
as is Buster Keaton, really.
I was thinking of the other silent stars and who was equally funny with sound. But I think only Charlie Chaplin and Laurel and Hardy were equally funny in their sound movies as their contemporaries. And I love Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, but that's something that I think makes them special. In terms of, so I get what you're saying about the, the long setups before you get the punchline, but the relationship. So the status relationship for me is instant, because when they are introduced, the mule is walking along. Standing next to the mule is Stan with like the pig hats and the big bag, on his shoulders, and they're pulling some kind of train full of furs, and lying on it like Cleopatra is Oliver Hardy. So you've got the kind of high status, low status relationship before a joke's been made. Well, you could say that's the first joke when you see them like that. However, that doesn't mean that the high status one of the two is going to avoid humiliating themselves and injuring themselves and so on. And in fact, it may even be funnier because the high status character's got further to fall, and he is literally the one that falls into the pool, because there's far less comedy to be milked from a low status person sort of injuring themselves.
Punching downwards isn't funny. No, you're right. The status is established very early, but their relationship there's so much love there, which sort of leaps from the screen. They just adore working with each other and clearly having a lot of fun. Like there's the scene where Lola Marcel, played by Sharon Lynn, is tickling. She's trying to get the deeds out of Stan's shirt and is accidentally tickling him for ages. And you can see she's corpsing. She is laughing. She's supposed to be deadly serious trying to get the deeds out of his shirt, and she is actually visibly laughing at how funny Stanley is, and there is a joy underlying all of it between the dynamic of the relationship on and off screen between the two of them, which is quite sweet.
And they are benign as well. They're not trying to rip anyone off or con anyone. They're actually trying to do a nice thing.
I think you find that with quite a lot of double acts. They're just trying to get out of scrapes and bad situations, and they just want to better their lives and make some money somehow. Sometimes they have to do it in a devious way, but that seems to be the overall goal, and just to sort of try and keep out of danger, but inevitably end up in danger in doing that.
Yeah, I was thinking a contrast with the more modern Dangerous Brothers, who are kind of mischief makers, the destruction. They kind of want to create destruction, but what Leslie said is, I think you're spot on. Laurel and Hardy do not want to create chaos. It just sort of happens to them, and perhaps that's why we have so much affection for them, as they're not victims of any malice, of any of their own malice.
I just love it, and there's a thing which I like is apart from the obvious jokes, like he has to eat his hat, which is made of licorice, but there's this sort of continuity that everything that happens to them damages their clothing, and it's the continuity is it's like Die Hard. Basically, he starts well dressed and ends up a torn and tatty, dark vested, bloody mess, and that happens in a less Bruce Willis kind of way to Laurel and Hardy. They bear with them the scars of their journey from start to finish, and the beautiful like reincorporation. Like he's got a hole in his boot because he's poor and has walked across the country dragging the donkey, and he's the buckaroo, and he's got a hole in his boot, so he tries to fill it with some meat that's too tough for the customer, and then the dogs start to sniff around his foot. So he feeds the meat to the dogs. It's like some gags are set up and they just take about 4 or 5 scenes to deliver. And that's really lovely, I think, as well.
And of course, Die Hard. I mean, the similarities are obvious. It's not just the vest that we often seen Ollie in, but yes, but losing his shoes, that's what happens to Bruce Willis, isn't it, in Die Hard? I haven't seen those connections before, Neil, but I'm going to rewatch Die Hard. Leslie, can I move to your first film? We'll come back to Neil for his second one soon. You've chosen Shakespeare in Love.
I chose it because it's got a little theme that's running through my mind at the moment, which is cross-dressing, transgender, which is very much talked about at the moment. But this film just takes you right back seductively to a time when men and women both dressed up to their best. The men wore beautiful velvet embroidered clothes, as well as women. Everybody just looked fantastic if you could afford the clothes. It rings a little, it hits a little note in me also because my father, who was straight, did occasionally in his youth like to dress up in female clothes. He was part of an act that used to tour around, where they used to cross dress. They had a woman who used to dress as a man, like a Burlington Bertie type, and my dad and another man used to dress as women. And they went around the cabaret circuits up north, doing this for years and years. And it was always a normal thing that, Dad used to dress up as a woman. And in fact, when he died recently and we were sorting out all his clothes, we found some of his dresses and shoes, which was strange, but also, pretty okay. And a couple of weeks ago, I went to see, you used to know Eddie Izzard as well, didn't you? He's an old contemporary of ours going back.
Yes.
And I went to see her in her one-woman show. He does the whole of Great Expectations in 2 hours, and she looks fantastic dressed in the way that she dresses now. And this just kind of rung a bell with me, all this lovely cross-dressing. We've got that in my other film choice as well. But in Shakespeare in Love, we've got it many layered. You've got, Shakespeare used it as a device because they weren't allowed to have women in the theatre. So they used to have to get boys to play girls, and then they disguised themselves as men. So you had all this sort of multi-layering of disguises and, what gender are you and who falls in love with who and what have you. So there's the way I chose this, and it was a time when it was okay for everybody to wear makeup and jewels, and the more lavish you were dressed, male or female, the more attractive you were.
Now, I'd forgotten, revisiting the movie, that as well as Gwyneth Paltrow trying to pass some mail so that she can legitimately have a part in the play that Shakespeare's writing, that Joe Fiennes as Shakespeare, I'd forgotten there's a scene in which he tries to pass as a girl.
That's right.
I completely forgot that.
He uses it to sneak out of her bedroom when her suitor, who she's got to marry because she's got to marry a millionaire, and that's a through thread into my other film choice, Some Like It Hot. They've spent the night together. I mean, they're madly in love, but the only way that Shakespeare can escape is sort of a bit like Toad of Toad Hall when he escapes as a washerwoman, which is a bit controversial now. Dressed as a servant, a female servant, and he sneaks past the Earl of Essex, who's that played by Colin Firth brilliantly, to get out of the house. Yeah, and he uses it later because he goes to see the Queen, played by Judi Dench, talking to Viola, Gwyneth Paltrow's character, where she has an audience with the Queen. And he's in the background dressed again as this sort of female servant. So lots and lots of cross-dressing.
And Judi Dench wore her own clothes as the only actor.
That was my dress.
Well, she's been working ever since the 17th century, as far as I can work out.
I mean, what a cast! That film, when you watch it again, that's absolutely Geoffrey Rush. It's just absolutely Rupert Everett's absolutely packed with
Martin
brilliant.
Studens,
Imelda.
Richard Burberry. Yeah, Imelda. Where is she now?
This is Imelda Staunton. Yeah.
not Imelda Marcos, the late
Although
widow of the president of the Philippines.
although the number of shoes in this film would be impressive,
Would be
even
very
in Imelda
impressive.
Marcos's wardrobe. But
And
I think,
you've got Rupert Everett sneaking in there as Christopher Marlowe, and there's this lovely, clever twist because we've never really sorted out what did really happen to Marlowe, and they kind of, Stoppard writes in this little twist where Shakespeare pretends that he's Marlowe and Colin Firth has him killed, but it's Marlowe that gets killed really. And so that's quite a nice little plot twist there that I think was fabricated just for the film.
It is a bit of a mystery, though. I live in Lewisham, and I have been on a walking tour where I was taken to the spot where Marlowe allegedly was murdered outside a Deptford pub.
Oh, that's exciting and macabre.
Well, that sounds busy high street now. Actually, I tried to imagine being in the kind of shadowy Tudor times.
Yeah.
I think, I absolutely adore this film. I think when I was younger, I just really enjoyed sort of patting myself on the back to get all of the references to all of the Shakespeare and Marlowe and Jonson plays. But watching it again for more recently, I found it really moving, politically and emotionally. I think that they are Shakespeare, Joseph Fiennes and Gwyneth Paltrow's character are star-crossed lovers. They're never going to be able to be together, but they are so in love, and it's really heartbreaking. And the other side is the sort of patriarchy, and the line that Judi Dench delivers, like, I know a thing or two about being a woman in a man's world, and you go, that's incredible. I mean, there was so much more to enjoy watching it again.
Yeah.
But those two are incredible together, Gwyneth and Joseph.
Hypnotic. I mean, the moment they first sort of look into each other's eyes, you see them fall absolutely madly in love, and then that is just the crux of the film, this love and this passion, and then you get all this beautiful montage of them falling in love. He realizes that this boy that comes to audition, which he finds himself strangely attracted to, he follows her, he chases after her, and he gets in a boat, and then you get the bloke rowing the boat, a bit like your London cabbie going, oh, I've had Christopher Marlowe in my boat before, and then he tries to give Shakespeare his script to read, and then Gwyneth Viola runs up the steps, and the guy in the boat says, well, that's what's her name? That's the woman. And then Shakespeare realizes who she is, and then eventually they get together, and then she gets the part, and then you've got this gorgeous montage of them falling in love, rehearsing the play. She's dressed as a boy, and she's playing Romeo with a male actor playing Juliet, and then it sort of crosses over to them learning lines in the bedroom, and he's writing the play because he had writer's block, but now he's in love. He can write again, and it just all pours out, and you see the building of Romeo and Juliet on this amazing set of the Globe Theatre, which is one of my favourite places in the world. So yeah, it's just full of passion. A lot of it is fabricated, but a lot of it is based on fact and reality about Shakespeare's life in those early days, and
it's I think you've really captured it for me as well, because it's a wonderful romantic drama, it's a wonderful romantic comedy, and it's just the most erudite kind of pastiche of Shakespeare all rolled into one. I would also add, from my point of view as a kind of movie nerd, I think it's the best thing Joe Fiennes has ever done on a cinema screen. Absolutely. And the best thing Gwyneth Paltrow's ever done. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes it's because they met each other and they had that moment and they really shone. And since then, obviously Fiennes has got his role as the evil commander in The Handmaid's Tale, and Gwyneth now sells luxury nonsense to people prepared to pay for it. I'm going to move to your next film, Neil, which is much more contemporary. And you've chosen Fight Club.
Yes.
What drove this, oh bruised friend?
So I know we're not supposed to talk about Fight Club, so I'm breaking both of the first two rules. But firstly, my reason for choosing this is because it made a very, very deep impact on me when I saw it. But I used to be in a comedy double act with my good friend Tom Hillenbrand, and the first time we started to get really good paid gigs around the country, I think it was our first run at the Glee Club in Birmingham. So we were kind of doing whatever it is you did, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we were staying in Birmingham, and we just had time to kill in the afternoons. And it was the week that Fight Club came out. So I think we must have gone on the Friday afternoon to the multiplex. So me and my double act partner sat in a cinema and watched this extraordinarily dark, violent, hilarious, philosophical, complex movie, and then just came out and had to sort of perform comedy that night. And I think we actually put a line in our set that night where one of us just said, "I want you to hit me as hard as you can." And I can't even remember what the payoff was, but it was too soon because no one else had seen the film that day. It hadn't become, because I think it was a bit of a slow burn, Fight Club.
Yes, it was a movie that didn't do great box office, but then was a massive hit on DVD, although some would have been familiar with the book. So the stuff around Fight Club and reading the rules has entered the language now, even from people who haven't read the book or seen the film.
I think, and one thing that's very clever about the rules of Fight Club is because of the massive twist. And are we going to, I suppose the fact that I'm talking about a double act, we have to address the elephant in the room, that there isn't an elephant in the room.
Well, I think we will allow the spoiler because the nature of the relationship between the two characters can only be properly illustrated by giving away the ending, which is
okay.
Which I'll let you do, Neil, so I don't get into trouble.
So basically, you have this guy who doesn't have a name. He's known as the narrator, played by Ed Norton, and he's going through an insomnia, a crisis, and then he randomly meets this incredible, charismatic, smart, sexy character played by Brad Pitt called Tyler Durden. And then his life kind of changes and they become this destructive, dynamic, sexy partnership that then turn into a terrorist cell, railing against commercialism and corporate dominance. And the payoff is that there is no Tyler Durden, that it's just a side of the narrator's personality that he's exploiting to do the things that he would be too scared to do if he were just himself. And it's a massive, and I think that film, still watching it again now, you have to do so much mental gymnastics to retrofit the absence of Tyler Durden from the first time he appears, because you still can't quite work out exactly how he does all the things. And it does explain it narratively in the film, how he's able to do it, because he just doesn't sleep when he's kind of whatever the official term for it is. Sorry, there's just a cat walking across my roof. And it's multiple personality disorder, I guess. So when one part of his brain switches off, that's when Tyler Durden takes over. But basically, this one person has done all of this stuff, and he fights himself, and he starts Fight Club. So the double act there is something that really sort of struck a chord with me, because they're sort of different facets to my life. When I do certain things, acting, obviously, you have to play a character, but also in other walks of life, I know that I put on a different persona. And you always want to be perceived as the kind of Tyler Durden version of you. And I think that Brad Pitt's, it's like the performance of a lifetime by Brad Pitt. He is incredible in it. And, other actors could have just sort of walked through that just knowing that they were beautiful and charismatic. But he delivers and delivers and delivers. And I think the unsung hero of the film is Helena Bonham Carter, because her character is kind of a true line. She gives hints all the way through that the narrator is also Tyler Durden. And you when you watch it again, you realize that she's just speaking to the same person all the time.
So the relationship between Tyler Durden and the narrator is one of almost wish fulfillment, isn't it? There's a line in which Brad Pitt, as the projection, says, I am the person you would like to look like, the person you'd like to fuck like, and also I'm completely free. So I was going to ask the two of you if you each could project this wish fulfillment other version. Not that you aren't already people I would like to look like and everything else like. Leslie, who would be your Tyler Durden projection?
Helen Bonham Carter, obviously. Yeah. I mean, she's just amazing. I love her. She's a fantastic actor. But in real life as well, she's super cool. I love the way she dresses. I love her attitude. She's very individual, but she's also just so attractive and interesting. I love her. I love her so much. I'd really like to be her. Love to be her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a very good case being made. Neil, you've had a bit of extra time to think of yours.
Well, up until 24 hours ago, I would probably have said Will Smith.
Oh dear, that's very topical.
So, someone who just appears to be incredibly intelligent, incredibly strong, incredibly talented, and sort of very giving would have been my choice. But then he punched Chris Rock, and now we don't know how to feel about him.
Well, I know how I feel about him, which is for someone who played Muhammad Ali in a movie, I would have expected a much better punch. So I was disappointed on a number of levels by Will Smith's behaviour. So any other thoughts from you, Leslie, on this very, can I say it, very male, an exploration of a very masculine double act, which we then find out are actually two elements within a male person? Can you speak on behalf of all women now, Leslie?
I don't really know what I should say. I mean, I didn't really think that it was very male. I just thought the characters were the character was extremely interesting. I mean, I'm so used to watching male-dominated films and TV things that I kind of stop. I sort of blank it out. I mean, occasionally I do say there's only one woman in this. But in the case of Fight Club, it's kind of irrelevant that they were male and they were fighting. I mean, women fight, and we all get a bit fighty. Women like a good fight as well.
Maybe they should do like they did the Ghostbusters reboot. Maybe they should do an all-female Fight Club reboot.
I was just thinking that they should do. Yeah, who could you get to play it?
Or you get Lupita Nyong'o and Florence Pugh.
Yeah.
I mean, that's two fantastic casts.
That's a great idea.
And one thing I just about Fight Club, that because there was such a spoiler, the twist is on the same kind of level as Sixth Sense. It's such an enormous twist. And
no, don't give away two films in the same show.
Too many spoilers.
And like Way Out West, the film plays with the nature of it being a film, because there's even an in-meta joke when they revisit the ending that starts the film, and they change the line of dialogue, and Brad Pitt's character comments on that. But even another layer of meta, the first rule of Fight Club, you do not talk about Fight Club, is almost an instruction to audiences and critics. Please don't talk about Fight Club when you leave the cinema.
Yes.
And that I love the sort of meta-textual layers that you get with a movie like this.
Of course, they borrowed that from The Mousetrap, where they used to tell the audience not to talk about the ending of The Mousetrap.
Very similar works.
They still do, in fact, make the same exhortation to the audience at the end of the movie. Brad Pitt, perfect casted. Edward Norton, very good at everything he does. Brad Pitt really shone. It was almost Russell Crowe, but I think Brad Pitt was, I just think, made for him.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you for talking about Fight Club, even though we shouldn't really have. Your next movie, you've teed it up earlier by mentioning it by name, in fact. But for those who are listening and didn't pick up on it, it's going to be Billy Wilder's.
Wilder.
Billy Wilder on. For those who didn't,
Calm down.
no, Billy Wilder was the most
Oh,
famous guest that my dad ever had at his restaurant. Anyway,
really?
he rang me up to
Yeah,
say Billy Wilder's here.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You just highlighted your Italian heritage, and I did notice it is a coincidence. Not only do my two films have cross-dressing in them, but they've also got an Italian theme. Obviously, Shakespeare in Love, Romeo and Juliet, set in Verona, where we laid the scene, and then
Yeah.
jumping forward in time to Chicago, 1929. We've got the mafia during.
We do. It's not literally Italy, but it is. It is Italian American.
It is
Yes.
Italian Americans, and the
Yeah.
Italians are there, like ruling, the sort of underworld during the period of Prohibition in 1929 Chicago.
Now, this has got 3 great performances.
Oh.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Leslie. The dynamic between which, for you, shines the brightest? I found it really hard to say which scenes I preferred. Tony and Marilyn, Tony and Jack, Jack and Marilyn.
Well, it obviously, Marilyn doesn't come into it until sort of must be nearly halfway through.
Oh, that's true. That is true. There's a lot of just the boys.
The boys are brilliant. We've got Jack Lemmon and we've got Tony Curtis, 2 absolutely gorgeous matinee idols, which they work together a lot. They're together. They're these musicians. They're poor, but they're just trying to work. And earn a crust of bread, but then they witness the St. Valentine's Day massacre, and they get all caught up in that plot, and just through a whole series of events where they're just trying to escape because the leader of the mafia, they've all got brilliant names. What is the name?
Spats Colombo? Is it?
Spats Colombo, and there's spats in it. I mean, what are spats? Why do you wear these bits of white fabric over the top of your shoes, and why were they such a big thing in those days? I don't understand them at all. But yes, Spats Colombo works out that they've witnessed the massacre and try to catch them, but they manage to escape, and then they have to go to their agent, who says, well, the only job I can get you at the moment is in an all-girl band in Florida, and they're just about to set off. So in the end, they agree that they will be the bass player and the saxophonist in this all-girl band and disguise themselves as women. So basically, they're on the run, dressed as women, and there's a big build-up to this historic filmic moment when you see them dressed as women at the train station to catch this big steam train from Chicago to Florida, which is an epic train journey in itself. There's this moment where Mallory just wiggles down the train platform with her ukulele and all her luggage, and she's in the band. She's the ukulele player, and then that's when the movie really starts to take off, because you've got this sort of 3-way dynamic between them all.
And that's when they find it harder and harder to hide their genuine
erections.
Maleness.
I was going to say their gender identities, but of which part of it is certainly manifested that way, because they both. Well, it's interesting. Well, not more than interesting. It's incredibly entertaining, the different who's attracted to who, in what persona are they attracted to that person.
And
it's just a wonderful patchwork of desire.
To make it in black and white, because lots of films were being made in colour in those days, in 1958, when I was born, because apparently they thought that the Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis looked better in female makeup in black and white. And I think Tony Curtis looks pretty cute in lipstick. He really does.
He's beautiful. Look, Tony Curtis is. I mean, Jack Lemmon has got a very pleasant face, a charming, attractive man. Tony Curtis is beautiful in this film, but in his different incarnations, as his sort of genuine self, as the captain of the cruise ship, and as what's his taken name? Is it Genevieve? Is he Genevieve?
No, he's Josephine because his name is Joe. And then they tried to make Jerry, the Jack Lemmon's character, Geraldine, but he plumps for Daphne. During the train journey, the thing is that it's the strict no alcohol or partying policy by the band leader woman who's sort of, sends them to bed early on this lovely long sleeper train. But then Sugar Cane, Marilyn, sort of comes to thank Jack Lemmon's character Daphne in bed because he covered up for her when she dropped a flask of alcohol. And she's like lying next to him and going, "Oh, thank you." And he's obviously quite excited by the fact that he's got her lying next to him. And then they get some whiskey, and then all the other band members come and they kind of have this girly party, and they've got no idea that these two blokes are there sort of enjoying all their female company on the train. So that's a great scene as well.
Well, it's great. It also made me think that the girls actually are the ones behaving badly, and the boys are trying to not behave badly because they don't want to get caught. But of course, deep down, they probably do want to behave badly. It's so subtle. It just reverses so many sort of stereotypes, and has fun doing it, while at the same time, it's always kind of asking us the question. And then there's that extravagant sort of prehistoric masculinity of the gangsters, who are just like forces of mass destruction, throughout the film, while the boys are actually having the time of their lives, even though they're in fear of their lives. That's how I remember it. Neil, I haven't given you a chance. That's a wonderful double act, isn't it? Jack and Tony in this.
Yeah, it's beautiful. The problem is the first rule of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre is you must not talk about the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It's lovely. I mean, it's so dreamy watching Jack and Tony work together. And, there's the right through to sort of Monty Python, the kind of the vocalization of a man trying to do the voice of a woman and getting the pitch wrong, and even that comes in. There's a lovely joke in Way Out West where Stan sings, and he sings a high octave and his voice is ADR'd by a woman, and then a low octave. No, it's beautiful. And of course the ending is a lovely sort of non-gender specific pansexual nod with the "nobody's perfect." I mean, it's such a
the final gag is
ahead of its time.
Sort of genuine gender revealed,
Yeah.
Not a problem.
Yeah,
To
love it.
the multimillionaire Joey Lewis, who is hilarious, along with pretty much every other actor that speaks in this movie.
It's probably my favorite Billy Wilder movie.
Well, that's a very that's quite a claim. But then, of course, he traverses so many different genres. So how can you compare Sunset Boulevard and Starlight 17 with, say, Some Like It Hot
Or Double Indemnity, or
the Apartment?
I just fell in love with Jack Lemmon in The Apartment. I saw that when I was really, really young. My parents just loved old movies, especially my dad, and so we got to watch all these things when we were quite young. And I adored The Apartment. Jack Lemmon is just beautiful and dreamy with Shirley MacLaine. And it's got sort of a bit of pathos because I think she's a bit suicidal, and but just those old black and white movies and the dialogue, just dreamy. And it's been great to sort of revisit these old movies again because of this podcast. So thank you, Luke.
Well, and I'm going to say thank you, your parents, because I think what was happening there is so that you wouldn't complain and demand a colour TV, they just showed you black and white films so you didn't even know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
you
We
know,
didn't have much money, but we had a lot of love and we had a lot of film watching. And we
yeah.
used to watch loads of musicals as well. So that's pretty much my heritage.
I'm going to talk a little bit about something that I raised earlier: status within double acts, high status and low status, because it's something that informs my work. For those that care one way or the other, but it's so much of what I observe in double acts that really engage and whose memory sort of stays with us. Because even within the two, the two musicians in Trouble, you have the more self-possessed, higher status Tony and the less
Yes, he's definitely high
confident
status.
Jack. So
Yeah.
we are seeing this time and again, and I'm going to talk about the double act in the movie that I want to mention, which is The Producers.
Ah, yeah.
Because when I rewatched The Producers, and I have actually seen it many times, I was once again looking at these two characters who share a kind of destiny, like most double acts. They've got a problem to solve, which is they've got to lose a lot of money in order to make a lot of money. And they've got to do it through producing a Broadway flop. And they're kind of tied together the way their fates are tied together, in the way that great sort of partnership fates are tied together. So, Tony Curtis has got his own wants, but, Jack could ruin it, so, and same with Stan and Ollie. They have their own personal wants, but they're kind of tied to each other. And what ties Gene Wilder and Zero Mostel together is they have to put on this show. It has to lose money. They're going to rip off the investors. That's the MacGuffin. But their introduction is a wonderful masterclass in the writing of status and the acting of it. And I love this, how Gene Wilder comes in as this sort of timid, self-effacing accountant, and there's this enormous personality and enormous physical presence of Zero Mostel, who starts by bullying him, who then starts to beg him, and eventually seduces him into becoming his partner. And it's almost like, here's a scene as to how all those great double acts, it's like the origin story of so many double acts, of Abbott and Costello, or what any of these, Walter Matthau and Jet Lemon, or French and Saunders. How did it start? How do these two different people end up kind of bound together? What have they got in common? What is different between them? Why we want to watch them? And it's also one of my favourite political satires ever, because I think that with all the wonderful musical pastiches and the wonderful performances and the great cast of supporting actors, Dick Shaw and Kenneth Mars, you still have at its centre this ridiculing of all the camp fascist iconography that came with Nazism. And it comes from a place it comes from the heart. So Mel Brooks said he wrote this partly as a riposte to the anti-Semitism that he had encountered when he was in the army, as well as the anti-Semitism that poisoned the whole 20th century. And it's brilliant. And the Springtime for Hitler musical climax it really is the climax. How often do we watch a movie where they're going to a special place or meet a special person, or they're going to solve a special mystery, and the solution and the place and the person, they never live up to their expectations. But when I watched Springtime for Hitler as a teenager at the National Film Theatre, I couldn't believe what I was watching. And as it cut from scene to scene, it got funnier and funnier and more mischievous. And it is the first and only time I was quaking so much. I did genuinely almost fall out my chair. I was shaking and I was sliding down the seat and had to stop myself.
It's just so shocking. It's just absolutely shocking and hilarious and daring.
At the same time, which I will say, I'm going to ask you this in a minute. In my comedy, I've always lent, even when not consciously, I wanted to be a bit of both. I want to make people laugh, but I also want to kind of shock them at the same time and put them in their state where they're going, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Should I complain or applaud, Luke? And
Yeah.
boy, does that film do it.
It is. It's a
brilliantly.
great film.
Anyway, over to you.
I think when you're watching it and it gets to Springtime for Hitler, you are going, "Is this okay? Is this? Am I okay to laugh?" And you're uncontrollably laughing because it's beautifully put together. But a big part of your brain is going, "Is this allowed?"
What Neil was saying about that question, is it okay? I was thinking, for me, as a consumer of comedy, the Young Ones was the first thing that people started to talk about. Is that all right? It just seems to be so violent and destructive. And then, of course, we had Bill Hicks, and we had Andrew Dice Clay, and we have Dave Chappelle, and we have Frankie Boyle, and Sarah Silverman, and Larry David. And I was thinking, but Mel Brooks was doing this in 1967 when you couldn't say the word bottom on television. You'd got an X rating if you showed a bottom in the movies. I just think it's really ahead of its time.
It was my dad Joseph Alberston's favourite musical ever, and I don't know how many times he went to see it or watched it on the TV. He just loved it, and he was the old generation. I mean, he was born in 1928, but he thought it was brilliant. So yeah.
But I'm really glad you chose this, because I nearly chose Young Frankenstein, but I couldn't quite crowbar it in as a double act movie. But Mel Brooks was so super important to me as a teenager, and Blazing Saddles has got several jokes in it which are totally inappropriate, but
so
brilliant.
Shocking.
But yeah, I nearly probably fourth on my list for this podcast was Young Frankenstein.
Did you know that the double act in Blazing Saddles, which is sort of Gene Wilder and Cleveland Little, was going to be Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor?
Oh.
And that would have been amazing.
Oh.
But Richard Pryor, because unfortunately of his substance misuse problem, was late on set. He couldn't be. They couldn't get the insurance either, and so he ended up writing gags for it.
Oh.
And although they became a double act in Silver Streak and other movies, Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, I think they would have been absolutely gold in Blazing Saddles. Whereas the vehicles for them later on, none of them were from Mel Brooks, were never as good. In my view, yeah.
Yeah, my love of Mel Brooks. So my local video store in Southwood and Ferrers was called Capricorn Video, and I still remember to this day how gracious and magnanimous the guy who ran it was, because I'd rented and watched History of the World Part 1 over and over again, and I always asked him, "Do you know when Part 2 is coming?" And I was earnest. I wasn't being sarcastic, because I didn't get it. Wasn't a bit. I was like 12, 13, and
who's on base? I thought that was that.
No, but I was. And he never said, yeah, well, I'll let you know. Like, he never sort of said, "Stupid boy, it's a joke." And very much like when you realise that the Beatles is a pun. It was much later when I realised, that's a joke. The title of this film is a joke, and I never got it. However, I got all of the jokes in the film. I just didn't get the meta joke of the title. So Mel Brooks has been very important. So thanks for flagging up the producers.
I remember being really impressed by the end of Blazing Saddles, because doesn't it take you into a cinema?
Yep, it does.
And then you're in a cinema, and I was a teenager, and I thought, this is incredible. So meta.
It's a feature that most people forget about the film, because there are so many just wonderful, silly, great one-liners, gags, performances, Madeline Kahn and everyone in it, that actually that we were talking earlier about breaking the fourth wall, that literally comes through the screen of the cinema at the end.
Yeah.
It also has the Count Basie Orchestra playing in the desert.
Yeah.
I will mention my final film. It's less well known, but it has what I considered a really unique pairing of characters and actors, and it's Hal Ashby's Harold and Maude. because this movie has an 18-year-old male lead and an 80-year-old female lead, and they fall in love. And they actually, we see them. We don't see the act because it's 1971. We see them sitting up, in bed together after their friendship develops into a romantic one and blossoms in a sexual way. So it's absolutely, sort of unique. The theme is about life and death, with a young man, and like a lot of alienated, failure of the counterculture, Vietnam War, everything gone sour, Nixon era, all that stuff is in there. 1971, 18-year-old, we're not going to change the world with flower power and so on. His kind of nihilism is tempered when he meets this 8-year-old woman who lives life like Tyler Durden. Races cops on their motorcycles, steals things, breaks things, goes to funerals and misbehaves. And they are kind of uniquely paired throughout this film. So Harold and Maude is one of those several gems from the new Hollywood period that aren't household name movies like Chinatown, like Easy Rider, like Bonnie and Clyde are. So that's my recommendation.
Lovely.
To anyone out there who wants to see it offbeat.
And it just proves there's nothing wrong with an age gap romance.
And it also proves that just because you're getting old, you don't have to start behaving. You can still be yourself at any age or do whatever you want.
She's a wonderful character. She's an artist. She's a collector. There is a scene. She lives in this abandoned train carriage that looks like it's just been left there from the hobo era, and you wouldn't know no one's living in it. And but then inside, she's just collected all this stuff from her life. She's been everywhere, met everyone. And one of the things she has is this incredible wooden sculpture. It looks a bit like a giant violin or the frame of a guitar, but it's perforated. And he's just sort of stroking it, feeling the textures of this beautiful polished wood. And it's bigger than him, it's about 8 foot tall. And then he puts his hand through it. And then I suddenly watched it and realised, oh my God, it's a giant wooden vagina. And it's never referenced because it's 1971. And you realise afterwards, it's a massive piece of erotic art. I never saw it as such, partly because, this is this eccentric lady's place. And, you imagine things and you don't see
Well, you were a virgin then, Lou.
Oh, well, I put it this way. I'd only ever seen the wooden version at that stage. Anyway, that's not necessarily the most rewarding scene, but it's one that I remember from it. Harold and Maude. We are coming to the end, but I hope we've done justice to those great movies that we've chosen as our favourites, and we've given a platform to the also-rans. Leslie Ann Albiston, Neil Cole, thank you very much for sharing your movies with myself and our audience. This has been another episode in the podcast, The Movies That Made Me. I am your host, Luke Sorba. My producer is Andrew Payne, and this is a Picard production.